Hello, I'm Herm Gailey. We're here on a beautiful fall day. The trees are getting color and losing leaves, and our horses are gaining hair and losing their manners because they're enjoying this cool weather. I'm here on Slim to make an episode that deals with a question or request from a gentleman whose screen name is Race Nail, which suggests to me that he's put horseshoes on a few horses at either the standardbred or thoroughbred tracks in his lifetime. And we've gotten comments from him before. They're always incisive, insightful, and the questions he asks are always things that probably should have been addressed in the first place and maybe didn't get dealt with in the episode. So we're going to take his invitation to make an episode following up on the recent segment we did on downward transitions with energy. And the question went something like this: you've shown us what you did, but could you show us how you did it? What you do with your seat, what you do with your hands, what the sequencing is. Which led me to the realization that while I would be delighted to do that, I have no clear idea of what I do, which is one of my many shortcomings as a teacher. You get to where a lot of this is intuitive, and you do things from muscle memory or instinct, and it's a little hard to explain. So what I'm going to do is go through the process and keep an eye on what I'm doing, listen to what I say, but maybe watch carefully what I'm doing, because we're all sorting it out at the same time. So we're going to do some transitions upward and downward, but particularly focusing on the downward transitions where we want to keep an element of forward motion and energy, even though we're changing gait and slowing down. So the first thing I will tell you is Slim here is a good example for today because he's had some time off, and whenever you give a horse, he's probably had 10 days off, whenever they get some time off, they rather quickly resort to their natural personality or natural tendencies. So his tendency is to be stiff and dull. Sorry, Slim, but it's a fact. He says he thinks it's a good thing. Well, judging by his fondness for stiffness and dullness, he probably does feel that way. So before I start doing any maneuvers, I'm going to make sure that I have his working parts broken loose. So rather than go and show you a specific movement, I want to make sure that his basics are still in place. Now you can see perhaps on the ground that I've trotted a few circles out here already today. But what I'm going to do, if you watch, when I pick up on the reins, he'll pick up a brace. Now maybe he knows he shouldn't now, but I'm going to pick up both reins, a little more pressure on the inside, and I'm going to drive him forward and say, go on, get up into the bridle and go forward. And make sure that he's not raising his chin and getting stiff in the face, because that is where your transitions, either up or down, can fall apart. So that actually feels pretty good. I'll move him out of the circle a little, move him back into the circle, just seeing that he keeps his body soft, chin soft, and then he's going forward and not getting distorted. So that's pretty good. You'll also see it when you ask one to stop. So he stopped like a good square halt. Ground is pretty wet. He's got regular horseshoes, so that's about all you would hope for. So I'm going to do the same thing the other way. See, he wants to pick up his head and lean a little. So I'm going to drive him up and release him when he gets into a softer frame. But for every pound or ounce of pressure I have on the bridle reins, I'll have about twice as much on my legs and seat driving him forward. Because if you just hang on his head, he'll just learn to lean on that, or he'll hollow out, or he'll just stop. Any horse would. So I'm going to push him up into the bridle a little more. I'm not pulling on his face, I'm just generating more energy. And then I'll sink down in the saddle and ask him to stop. Hold him till he softens up, because you can see he's got a little lean going on there. So you can get rid of that, buddy. Before I release him, I want his face to soften up. There you go. So what we'll do now is he feels like he's ready to be responsive, and we can do those upward and downward transitions. So we're going to have him in the bridle. And with a Western horse, you have to get them proficient in doing this on a slack rein, but the best way to teach it is with some contact. So the first transition I'll do will be an upward transition to just get him trotting. So I'm just going to squeeze, and I'm ride a little faster with my seat. I'm compressing my seat, compressing my legs, and sending him forward. And what you want to do when you have a transition that goes up or down, you want their legs to move at a different speed, but their frame shouldn't change and their energy shouldn't change. So if I bring him to a walk, I'm going to sit down, but I'm not just going to sit and wait for him to stop, and I'm not just going to pull on him. Like, I will just pull on him to slow him down with no leg. Actually, he wasn't terrible there, but over time, if you do that just a few times and all you do is say, slow down, they start sort of flattening out, hollowing out like that. So what you want to do, drive them up, sit back a little, curl your seat under, push with your pelvis, drive with your lower legs, and when you come down, just sit a little deeper, let your legs go still for an instant, and then put your legs back on so that they maintain their energy. So there's a kind of a built-in contradiction there. You're going forward, you ask them basically to stop, but then you say, not really. And the not really is real important, because if all you do is say, let's do a downward transition, we got to slow down, we're going too fast. Oops, I overdid it. You get out of position, he gets out of position. Whoops. Oh, too much. Oops. And you have that gap in there where there should not be a seam in your transition. It should be seamless. Now this may be a good one because he may think I want him to do what he's just been doing. So you come down and you maintain that forward. He's a little over forward for a moment and wants to be jiggy, so you put that out. Same thing when you pick up the lope. You don't throw yourself forward over their shoulder. You sit back maybe a tiny bit on your outside hip bone, but not a terrible lot. You'll never go too far wrong by remaining centered on your horse. You make sure you slide this right leg back to influence his hip, so you get the left lead. But just like at the trot, you want to drive him forward. See, he's a little stiff, so I'm going to drive him up into the bridle. Drive him up. Drive him up. Even though we're not going faster, he's driving forward. He's getting into a decent frame. And then when I do a transition, I got some energy to work with. I do that half halt. But see how he stopped his feet too much? He's not being bad, but he's a little confused. So I'm going to catch him a little sooner. I'm going to roll my seat up underneath, take some of the energy away, but put it right back on. That was much better. to get behind the bridle there, so I'm going to drive him up, get him a little more forward. And I'll pick up. There, that was actually quite good. Woo. And then you have to differentiate, because your stop is really the same thing you're doing in your half halt. You just sort of roll your feet a little, except you leave it on. So what you're doing is you are saying stop. And as they start to stop, your timing has to be there, and you send them through that before that stop becomes an actual maneuver in itself. They sink back enough to change gaits, but you immediately scoop them back up and go forward. It should be almost imperceptible. So that's a little food for thought. I hope it answers the question, and I hope I figured out as well as I could what I'm doing. Just remember, your legs are all important. If all you do is use your hands, you're only going to have about this much of your horse trained, and the rest of them is just going to be 1,000 pounds of hamburger. So to avoid that, because he doesn't look like he'd be all that tasty, you want to drive with your legs, keep that meat moving forward. So with that appetizing thought, I'll see you next time.